Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Jonas Holdeman.
And I'm Ralph Eisler. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
Today's topic is a scientific perspective of nature. Neil deGrasse Tyson has made the comment that if you're scientifically literate, the world looks very different to you. Dr. Tyson is an astrophysicist and director of the Hayden Planetarium. He is one of the best-known popularizers of science today, following in the footsteps of Carl Sagan. Today's show is a follow-up on our October 16th presentation when we had a lot of callers.
Yeah, so this is a call-in show, and while we go over a few announcements, we invite you to plan to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. This past Sunday, December 4th, we had a rather animated roundtable discussion about whether democracy is withering away in America. On Sunday, December 18th, the topic is a little more academic. It is titled, Paul the Apostle, How Might Karl Popper the Rationalist or John Dewey the Pragmatist Interpret Paul's Visions? This discussion will be presented by Joe Barnhart, who's one of the regulars here on Freethought Forum.
Visit our websites for additional details, including times and locations. But first, Ralph, I would like to make a personal request to African American viewers. In March, we expect to have Ben Barshaw from Atlanta speak to the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Ben is a co-founder of the group Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta and will likely speak on the subject of black atheists. If you are African American and are an atheist, agnostic, or beginning to question your beliefs, please mail us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com and let us know about your experiences.
Okay, well then let's go to in the news department. Here we find ourselves again at the end of the world plus 6 weeks. Once again, the prediction of the end of the world has failed. The people at Family Radio were so sure and remain so wrong. And this is pretty true for most predictions of the future.
Okay. Last week we had a special caller, Rita Swan, who spoke to us about the issue of religion-based child abuse and cited one book in particular, To Train Up a Child, as having a very egregious effect.
Egregious.
Egregious, thank you. Effect on Christian child rearing in America recently.
The following story by Jeff Hudson of the Seattle Times outlines the situation. It's called, Did Hana's Parents Train Her to Death? The deaths of 3 children each allegedly happened at the hands of their parents. Though they lived in different parts of the country, the parents all had several things in common. They adopted children, homeschooled them, and beat them with 1/4-inch plastic tubes. They were following the child-rearing teachings of a Tennessee evangelist, Michael Pearl, and his wife, Debbie.
Sean Paddock, age 4, suffocated when he was wrapped too tightly in blankets. Lydia Schatz, age 7, died after being spanked for several hours. And Hannah Grace Rose Williams, age 13, of Cindro Woolley, was left out in the cold where she died naked, face down in the mud. The deaths of 3 children occurred in different parts of the country, North Carolina, California, and Washington, but each allegedly happened at the hands of their parents, all of whom were charged with murder.
The Pearls wrote a book called To Train Up a Child, first published in 1994. This book teaches parents how to use a switch to make their children obey. Michael Pearl says it has sold more than 670,000 copies, been translated into a dozen languages, and is popular with Christians who homeschool their children.
The authors say raising a child is simple as training a dog. They cite biblical verses supporting the use of the rod. Their website includes comments from many followers who say they have successfully raised happy, obedient children using Pearl's principles. The Pearls, however, issue a warning to parents: never spank in anger, and they say many people have misconstrued their words. Critics claim the couple's advice amounts to a prescription for child abuse.
Yeah, and from another article at secularhomeschooling.com, Lydia Schatz's autopsy report was released on what would have been her 8th birthday. Her death was due to complications of rhabdomyolysis, a condition resulting from damage to skeletal muscles and frequently leading to kidney failure. Rhabdomyolysis is caused by direct physical impact injury, such as what might be sustained by a car victim in a crash or an earthquake. In Lydia's case, the injury leading to her death apparently were the beatings that she received on a regular basis from her parents, which were based on the Christian author Michael Pearl's book.
Also in the news, Kentucky church bans interracial marriages and then takes it back. Stella Hartville's childhood church in Pike County, Kentucky, voted to ban interracial couples from becoming church members after she and her fiancé, Tisha Chikuni, sang a song during a visit to the church over the summer. Stella is working on her master's degree in optical engineering at Indiana College. She met Chikuni, who is from Zimbabwe, at Georgetown College in central Kentucky.
Yeah, and when Stella brought her boyfriend back to her family's all-white church in rural Kentucky, she thought nothing of it. She and Tisha Chikuni worshiped there whenever they were in town, and he even sang before the congregation during one service. But in August, a member of the Gulnari Free Will Baptist Church told Harville's father that Chikuni couldn't sing there anymore. And on November 27th, in a moment that seems from another time, church members voted 9-6 to bar mixed-race couples from joining the congregation. The resolution says in part, anyone is welcome to attend services, but interracial couples could not be members or be used in worship services or other church functions.
At the time, the pastor of the church said the decision is unlikely to stand. So indeed, last Sunday, about 30 people who attended church services voted on a new resolution which welcomes believers into our fellowship regardless of race, creed, or color. So hats off to you members who rejected the racism of the minority. It is indeed sad when some Americans hate others because of the color of their skin. And I might add that this is a warning of our responsibilities in voting. If only 4 additional people had showed up for that church vote and voted in opposition to the motion, then all of this publicity, that unfortunate publicity, would have been avoided.
Yeah, and they I think only changed the situation because it got nationwide publicity. So, you know, if you have a very small service and people don't show up to vote, as you say, lots of bad stuff can happen.
Well, Ralph, let's hope that the moral fiber of the church community there was a important factor too.
I think it was. And so in the end, they did the right thing, but probably needed a little pressure to do it. Okay, well, we're going to get a regular program now. So back to our main topic. We're returning to the subject of how the world looks very different to the scientifically literate than it does to those who don't have much scientific education. This is especially true when we're talking about the origin, evolution, and composition of the universe. People who haven't been exposed to science often tend to invoke supernatural explanations. We started to talk about these points in an earlier segment, but ran out of time before we finished the discussion.
So let's recap a little of what we covered previously. Then we can further the discussion and contrast the natural and supernatural explanations of the cosmos. We know from the measured expansion rate of the universe that it started out as an incredibly small, hot, dense object 13.7 billion years ago in what has been called the Big Bang. It has now expanded to a size that is at least 82 billion light years across. A light year is the distance light travels in 1 year. That's almost 6 trillion miles. So our universe is pretty darn big.
Yeah, it is. Now, the early universe contained almost no elements except hydrogen and helium. All the other elements that are required for our familiar world, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, silicon, etc., were not formed until the first stars coalesced out of the hydrogen-helium matter. So these other elements could be formed by nuclear fusion reactions. And when stars died in sudden supernova explosions, these elements were spread out into space. Now, this whole process took about 500 million years to get started, with those first stars being formed and then dying off. And the matter from these early stars then recondensed to form second-generation stars and planets. And the process repeated. And our sun now is a third-generation star that was formed about 4.57 billion years ago, along with the Earth and other planets. It will probably live about another 10 billion years.
On the screen behind us, you see a chart of the abundance of the elements. Note that on the left, hydrogen and helium are the most prominent. Now, this is a logarithmic scale, so they are much more prominent than you might get from just looking at the graph.
Yeah.
The measured ratio of hydrogen to helium is one of the pillars that supports the Big Bang hypothesis of the origin of the universe. Now, as we said, all of the other elements were produced inside stars that formed after the Big Bang. We humans and everything else on Earth are literally made out of stardust.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing when you think of it, isn't it? That of the trillions and trillions of atoms in your body, every one of them was once inside a star. I think most people don't realize that. They don't teach you that in high school, but they should. Okay, well, let's contrast this situation with the magical explanations in the two creation stories in Genesis. Now, the fellows who wrote these stories lived about 3,000 years ago, and they were probably pretty smart for their day, but they certainly didn't have the scientific knowledge we now possess. So because they couldn't really know how the universe came about, they came up with a story that an invisible magician pulled some rabbits out of an invisible hat.
He not only pulled out rabbits, but elephants, snakes, mole crickets, and smallpox virus, tapeworms, the sun, the moon, and stars, and everything else in nature. In other words, because of their ignorance, they invoked the supernatural. Now, this is a fairy tale, not history. Such a story might have been okay 3,000 years ago, but it is rather pitiable to see people still using this excuse today when we have natural explanations for so much. The first phrase of the book of Genesis should really read, "Once upon a time." For example, stars are still being born in regions such as the Horsehead Nebula by the natural action of gravity. No gods are required to make them.
Yeah. So the great British anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski made the succinct comment on science vis-a-vis magic at one time. I always liked this. May not be able to read all of it up on the back, but I think you can read most of it. It says, science is founded on the conviction that experience, effort, and reason are valid, and magic on the belief that hope cannot fail nor desire deceive.
So,
now, religion and magic are not synonymous, but religious fundamentalists seem to rely a lot on magic to support their beliefs.
Besides the expanding universe, one of the other pillars for the Big Bang hypothesis is the presence of the cosmic background radiation. This is the residual radiation left from the superhot initial beginning, which, because of universal expansion, has cooled to just about 3 degrees above absolute zero. The false color plot behind us is a sky map of the temperature variation observed in the different locations. The red denotes hot spots and the blue cold spots, but although we call these hot spots and cold spots, they differ only by a few millionths of a degree Kelvin. Nevertheless, these differences were enough to ensure that some of the matter would begin to cluster together in the colder regions so that gravitation could cause the stars and galaxies to begin to form. There's nothing supernatural about this process.
No, indeed. It's a process that occurs simply because of gravity and its attractive forces. Now, these data that we're showing in this WMAP plot behind me, these data are some of the most important scientific measurements ever made for understanding cosmic origins. And they highlight one other point about how scientifically literate people understand the world around them. Sometimes I've seen fundamentalist preachers urging their followers to shut down those who talk about scientific pictures of the evolution of the universe by yelling, "Were you there?" Well, viewers, you can confidently answer yes when it comes to Big Bang cosmology. Maybe you weren't there right at the beginning, but what you see right now in this picture behind me is what was happening 300,000 years after the Big Bang. Because light travels at a finite velocity, it takes a long time to reach us. And prior to that time, the universe was so hot that only free electrons and atomic nuclei existed. Radiation could not propagate freely. Once the universe cooled so that electron protons recombined to form hydrogen atoms, the radiation was able to travel without interruption. And that's the cosmic microwave background we detect today, cooled by universal expansion. When you look at this data, you're looking at the universe as it existed almost 13.5 billion years ago. So, indeed, you were there.
Okay. Now, there's an interesting little story about this term Big Bang.
Yeah.
There were other theories. I think it was Eddington had a kind of a steady state universe theory, based on the belief that the universe existed forever.
Yeah.
And but they had to account for the fact that these stars were moving away, and so they violated another principle by allowing matter to be created in the space there. But anyway, this Big Bang was a very derisive term that was applied, and so once the principle succeeded, then it was turned around and it becomes a very apt description. It's kind of like the song Yankee Doodle, which was created by the British as to be derisive towards these rebels. And once the rebels started winning, they started singing it back to the British.
Singing it back to the British, yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, that steady state theory was in vogue for some time. It was pushed by Fred Hoyle, the two Burbridges, who were astronomers, and a fellow named Gould. And these are very reputable people, and at the time, this was in the 1950s, 60s, a lot of people believed that was true because they believed that the universe had existed forever and that it was pretty much unchanging. But as you say, in order to account for the expansion, they had to postulate that protons, neutrons were being created continuously. And Freddie Hoyle, he was a flamboyant guy. He was a very good physicist and was responsible for most of the calculations of nucleosynthesis in stars. But he also was one of these guys who got off onto tangents and thought he knew a lot about subjects which he didn't know about. He had a certain amount of ego, which you have to have, I guess, to be a scientist, a physicist. But the Big Bang hypothesis, or the steady state hypothesis, was finally put to rest about 1964, when people discovered this cosmic microwave background, which is something that would have had to have existed if you had this so-called Big Bang occurring. Yeah. So that's one of the main pillars of the theory.
So this just brings to light or reinforces the idea that science may make observations and develop alternate explanations to explain it, and then based on additional experimental evidence eventually arrive at a better of different kind of descriptions.
Yeah, and it also points out the fact that science is not carved in stone on tablets that came down from the mountain, okay, by a latter-day Moses. Science is always under investigation and always under, I won't say attack, but under pressure to prove itself. And so people keep doing more and more experiments when they have a theory to try to prove that theory is correct. And that's in contrast with, beliefs that come from the supernatural that are decided upon in advance, and then you try to find proofs to justify those beliefs and support them, instead of just taking the observations and trying to find out what they tell you. And that's where we get into the big conflict between science and religion.
Yeah, as our instrumentation improves, we're able to see deeper into the nature of the world. We can see further by improved telescopes, and deeper through improved microscopes. And so there are always new things that we find that we haven't seen before. And for a person who likes solving puzzles, I think science is a wonderful field to get into. You'll really enjoy your scientific life.
Yeah, well, I've often worried that it's a field for dilettantes who just like solving puzzles. Okay, but anyhow.
Okay, so how about the argument that you can't get something for nothing? Or the view expressed a few months ago by a letter writer to the Knoxville News Sentinel, trying to defend his views of a God as the creator of the universe, with the comment that he never saw a pot that wasn't made by a potter. Now, this is the kind of argument that relies on experiences we acquire through our five senses, that is, common sense. But these experiences tell us nothing about the deep reality of nature, which operates on scales much larger and much smaller than our sense can detect.
Right. Now, on a local scale in the universe, we're quite aware that there is something there, right? You and I are sitting next to one another. Sam is over there keeping us in business, and so we see material things. We can touch, we can feel, we can sense. Going to bigger things, we know that the sun's out there and there are planets which we can see with telescopes. But our suns or planets are mere specks within the Milky Way, which contains at least 100 billion stars. And we can see that in the picture of this Andromeda galaxy, which is like our Milky Way there. There are at least 100 billion stars in there, some of which may have solar systems or not. This looks like a lot of stuff. But even beyond that, we think there are the order of 100 billion galaxies in the universe, as shown by this remarkable picture taken by the Hubble telescope, what is called the deep field or deep space exploration there. Each one of those dots of light that you see out there is a galaxy, like that Andromeda galaxy we showed in the previous slide, and contains 100 billion stars.
And as the Hubble finally dies, it's going to be replaced by another telescope even more spectacular.
Yeah.
I just hope I live long enough to see some of the results from that.
I hope it doesn't get cut in the present funding situation. It would be really a shame, because we have found out so much about the origins of the universe and the world and what our place is from the Hubble telescope. And you can buy these books that have pictures that are taken there. Every one of them is just so spectacular, of things out there in space that you could hardly imagine. And it's been money well worth spent. And we have to remember, when it first went up, it had a big fault with the mirror.
Yeah,
The reflecting mirror that was in it. They hadn't accounted properly for the gravitational pull distorting the mirror when it was in the laboratory. And then when it got up above the Earth, well, it flexed a little bit more and it ruined the focus.
It was an incredibly small error in the shape. And it's just incredible that they're able to manufacture things to that tolerance.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole story in itself that's incredible, because there's astronauts who had to go out there and fix it. They had to ride the space shuttle up to it to fix this distortion in the thing. And there is a CD that you can buy that tells the story of that. It's just incredible.
Okay, yet on a global scale, taking the universe as a whole, it is quite likely that it contains nothing. Ralph, did you write this?
I wrote that.
Oh.
My physicist friends kick me all the time for saying that. But
oh, well, I can understand that, but I won't kick you. Now, let's explain what this means. Now, that may be a startling statement, but here is the scientific reasoning. When we talk of something in a given volume of space, we have to talk about the total mass energy content, because, as Einstein showed just over 100 years ago, mass and energy are equivalent. So if we add up all of the normal matter that we see here, the dark matter, dark energy in the universe, we get an awful lot of what we will call stuff. There are 10 billion trillion stars out there, which on the average might have masses equivalent to our sun. But the totality of all of these comprise only a 0.5% of the stuff in the universe. Most of the rest is in the form of so-called dark matter and dark energy, which we do not understand, but whose presence can be detected.
yeah. Okay. Well, so then how can we say there may be nothing in the universe? Well, we have to add up one more term into our account, and for all the mass energy. And this contribution is the gravitational potential that pervades all space. But it goes into the sum as a negative quantity, and insofar as science can tell, it balances out this stuff to leave the universe as a whole with zero mass energy content. If this is true, the origin of the universe does not represent a case of something coming from nothing, but of one state of nothingness changing to a more stable state of nothingness.
Ralph, we have a question here from a caller who asks, how fast is the Earth turning? Well, once a day. And going around the sun, well, once a year. But that I don't want to make. The circumference of the Earth is about 24,000 miles.
Yeah.
And so then it's going around 24,000 miles a day, and I think at the equator that turns out to be about 1,000 miles per hour.
Right. That's 1,000 miles per hour that you're really rotating around on the surface of the Earth. But you don't feel it, do you?
Now, I'll give you the more difficult one that I'm not prepared to do in my head.
Yeah. I used to have this number in my mind. I could probably work it out, but...
okay, it's something like this. The radius, the distance from the sun to the Earth is 93 million miles. And the circumference is 2 pi times 93 million. Which is about 6 times 93 million.
Yeah, say 100 million times 600 million miles, and divided by 365 days, or I can't tell you how many hours that is.
And then divide by 24 hours.
Yeah.
But it's still a very big number.
Yeah, it's still pretty fast. So you're not only rotating around on the surface of the Earth at a pretty high speed, but you're also moving around the sun at several thousand miles per hour.
And this is not to mention the speed with which the whole solar system is moving through the galaxy.
Right. And but you always have to determine the speed. You always have to have a reference frame in which to do it. So I can say that my reference frame is right where I'm sitting, and I'm sitting still, and everything else is moving around me. So,
Very good. Okay, now...
before we leave off this here, I would just... We went through it kind of fast, but I just want to point out again to people out there that the positive contributions to stuff in the universe, only about 0.5% for the stars, planets, interstellar gas, the dark matter, the dark energy, but all of that gets balanced out by the negative contribution of the gravitational potential energy that permeates all space. And so when I say there's nothing in the universe, basically what I mean is that sum comes to zero. And so far as we can tell, from all the astronomical observations that have been made, that's quite true. So I think it's time for us to go to the take a little break here, mid-program break.
Okay, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee, and by individual contributions. Shows are most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on community access television. We can be seen streaming online. For fans outside of the Knoxville area, go to ctvknox.org.
Okay. Well, you can send us feedback at the email address on your screen, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. But don't wait. This is a call-in show, and we're live today, December 6th. Viewers can call in now to the number on the screen.
And Black Atheists, please let us hear from you. The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets several times during the week. We have evening meetup for fun, food, and drink. We're atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and humanists who are reaching out to the social support to other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. The ASK mission statement to supply a venue for community camaraderie and outreach to the rationalist atheists in the Knoxville area. Remember, you are not alone. Visit the ASK website on the screen to join and find times for locations.
Okay, now the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless, such as the influence of money in politics. Boy, there's one that we really ought to get into deeply. Was Jesus a real person? The history of life, and the four horsemen of atheism. Once a month, we get together for a book club. Recent books have included Irreligion by John Allen Paulos, The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris, The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand, The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mladenov.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Now, back to our program, Ralph.
Okay, back to our program.
Ralph, you just to recapitulate here, you had made the point that if you add up all of the mass, the real mass, and energy, which is equivalent to mass, as both what the mass that we can see and that we infer through our instrumentations, then and this dark energy, which is accelerating the movement of galaxies and so on apart, and the gravitational potential of all of these, that it adds up to something which is pretty close to nothing, to zero.
Yeah.
Now, we may, through more careful measurements, find out that this is not quite correct, but as best we know right now, we are just nothing that has been divided into more stable configurations.
Right, right.
Okay, this is a perspective of Stephen Hawkins and Leonard Mlodinow in their book, The Grand Design, which we discussed a couple of months ago at the Rationalist Book Club. Moreover, they point out that in the beginning, when the universe was very small and its curvature extremely great, that the time dimension is indistinguishable from the three space dimensions.
That's an amazing idea. I wasn't really familiar with that myself.
Yeah, I have wondered about what the meaning of time would be during those early stages of the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, this result comes from the theory of general relativity, which has been very accurately verified. In such a case, time simply has no meaning. The corollary is that cause and effect don't exist because there is no way of saying that one event precedes another. In other words, no agent is required to effect a change of state for the universe. It happens spontaneously simply because one state is more stable than another.
Right. Now, our universe is all that we can know, and we can't even have contact with all of that. A lot of it is simply beyond whatever we can detect or whatever can influence us. Nothing that might exist outside our universe can ever have influenced us in any way. Nothing inside the universe can ever have been outside. And a logical consequence is that if the universe had a beginning, and if a God exists inside the universe, it must have been created along with the universe in a scenario such as Hawking and Mlodinow proposed. In other words, a God would have to be the result of creation, not the cause. So we're sitting here. We would really like to have your calls. Don't be bashful. Call in and discuss your ideas with us. You can tell us what you think we got wrong or what we got right or how you disagree. But we'll see how we can maybe shake down the difference between opinions and scientific facts.
Ralph, I hope that the lack of callers so far, except for the one who left the question for us, is not some malevolent plot to see what we will do if we run out of our script here. But
well, I don't know. I think we can always probably find something to discuss on this. But in any case, do call in because we are interested in what people out there think and what they have to say. And while our program may be a little more technical today than usual, don't let that intimidate you. Just call in and say hello. Okay, well, right now we'll get back to the program in any case, and let's look at another area where the mind fixated on magic comes into conflict with the scientifically literate perspectives, and that area is astrology. If you look in the paper every day, you'll see horoscopes that purport to tell you how planetary alignment with star constellations influence your life, depending upon your birth date. This is astrology.
Okay. The professional astrologers keep minute track of sunrises, sunsets, and the apparent motion of the constellations across the skies with the seasons. They produce very detailed timetables called ephemerides.
Yeah, ephemerides.
To make their predictions seem scientific, but because a bit of mathematics is involved. But it is really just pseudoscience. Double-blind testing experiments have failed to find any correlation between physiological profiles and positions of the planets and stars. The most renowned of these is Sean Carlson's double-blind chart matching test, in which he challenged 28 astrologers to match over 100 natal charts to physiological profiles generated by the California Psychological Inventory Test. When Carson's study was published in Nature in 1985, his conclusion was that predictions based on natal astrology were no better than chance, and that testing clearly refutes this. Ralph, you know, I just kind of did a little calculation, back of the envelope calculation last night, and concluded that there are about 100,000 people born every day on the Earth. And if those are born under the same astrological sign, then it would seem then that there would be a great deal of similarity, and people could be divided into 365 different categories and fall into one of those bins.
Now, I'll tell you how we get around this if we're an astrologer. We say that it's not just the day on which you're born. It's not just the hour or the minute. It's the millisecond in which you were born. And so everyone,
even that would, yes, it would.
or microsecond, whatever. So everybody can have a different personality, you know, depending upon that. Of course, if you read these horoscopes in the paper, they are so vague. I mean, you know immediately when somebody says to you, this might be a good day for you to take your dog for a walk. What he's implying is that it might not be a good day for you to take your dog for a walk. It either is or it isn't. And this is the way most of these horoscopes read. And it just seems so strange that people pay much attention to them. You can read them for fun or something, I guess. I think the thing that brought a lot of people up short in this country was that they found out that Nancy Reagan controlled President Ronald Reagan's schedule by consulting her astrologer every day to find out what was good for him to, whether it was good for him to go out or to meet with a foreign dignitary or something of the sort. I mean, our country was basically being run by, some nitwit with a globe, a crystal ball.
Oh, that's really scary, Ralph.
That is. Anyhow, one of the studies cited most often to support astrology is one done in 1955 by Michel Gauquelin, Frenchman. He stated that although he had failed to find evidence to support such indicators as zodiacal signs and planetary aspects in astrology, he had found positive correlation between the diurnal positions of some of the planets and success in professions such as doctors, scientists, athletes, actors, writers, painters, etc., which astrology typically associates with those planets. Seems like we have a call now, Jonas. So,
okay.
Go ahead, caller. You're on the air at Freethought Forum. Could you give us a name or a nickname?
Dale.
Dale. And Dale, do you have a question or comment for us?
Yeah. You just mentioned Nancy Reagan doing the astrology and helping President Reagan out with, I assume, decisions on this and that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know that some of our politicians today are really use religion or at least profess or the religion on their sleeve and all of that, and some of them seem to be more scientifically literate, as you're talking about today, than others. For example, Sarah Palin might be one of those that you would consider perhaps a little less scientifically literate.
Yes, I would.
All right. If you'd consider her a little bit less scientifically literate because of the things she says, I imagine you guys have been following our Republican candidates for president. I was wondering which of those, by anything they may or may not have said, are either very scientifically literate or the least scientifically literate. Do you have an opinion on that?
No, I can't say that I've ever sat down and ranked them on it. I know in the past, not not this round of elections, but the previous round of elections, when there were about 8 or 10 of the Republican candidates, they were specifically asked how many of them supported the theory of evolution. And I think there were 4 out of the 8 or 10 who just did not at all. For example, Mike Huckabee, who now is a broadcaster for Fox News. Sam Brownback, who is now governor of Kansas. But for the present crop, I can't really tell you.
Well, you know, Ralph, I think what we hear is the candidates speaking to their constituency. And they avoid seeming too intellectual, and so perhaps they, to some extent, are saying what they think their constituency wants them to say.
But I don't think the problem of science has been brought up, at least when I've seen them on television. So I'm not sure. I'm sure you're right that they are talking to their constituency, but sorry I can't help you out with an answer on that, Dale.
Well, I was just wondering. No, it wasn't an answer; it was an opinion. But you did mention Mike Huckabee and that, and I certainly will keep an eye on him. But I have also noticed that you appear to be correct in that having an uncomplicated and simple sort of person is quite often what the base for the Republicans is. Like President Bush seemed to be uncomplicated.
Yes, yeah, I think so, and I think that was a lot of the reason he got elected. If you remember when they asked people who would you rather sit down and have a beer with, it was George Bush. You know, it
you don't think they would be wanting just to make him fall off the wagon, do you?
I hadn't thought about it that way.
Well, I mean, he stopped drinking when he was a young man.
Well, he was over 40
or so.
He was about 40 or so when he stopped. I don't think they'd deliberately try to make him fall off the wagon. I think he came across as a nice, affable fellow to a lot of people, and whereas John Kerry came across as more of the elitist type, as the Republicans like to say. But
the disturbing thing, I think, is that the presidents and leaders in general need to be literate enough that they can distinguish some of the bull that advisors and promoters and lobbyists may present to them. I think that is one of the great values of being a physicist. We're both physicists.
Yeah.
Of being a physicist, in that your training is such that it allows you to recognize when things are just not making sense.
Yeah, and Dal, I can give you one example. It doesn't have to do with the presidential election, but earlier this year, the Tennessee House passed House Bill 368, and this was a bill that was sponsored by Reverend Dunn here, or not Reverend, Representative Dunn here in Knoxville, and it would allow teachers in science classes to basically teach creationism, at least if the students brought up the subject on it. And I wrote a letter to the paper about it and cited him and a couple of his other colleagues, one of whom is named Jeremy Faison, who's a representative from Cosby. And Representative Faison got a little upset about all this in the end, but finally he came down to, I won't quote all the exchange, but finally came down to the point saying, well, he didn't believe in evolution. He believed in the creation as it was set out in the first chapter of Genesis, because we're all Christians here. Now, Christianity doesn't have anything to do with creationism. They're separate items. So, but people tend to conflate them. So go ahead, Dale.
Well, no, I appreciate your relating that. Yeah, I'm longing for the good old days when we have politicians of a variety of backgrounds. For example, for a while there, Jimmy Carter was a physicist. Even though he only had a one-term presidency, I kind of wish we had smart people back in the White House. You remember our founding fathers? A lot of those fellows were very curious about nature. Jefferson and several of the others. Anyway, yeah, it just seems like the politicians don't seem to have much of a scientific background at all. I really should get off, and I'm sure there's somebody else that would like to call in before your show is up. Good show, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much for calling, Dale. We really appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, continuing. So again, we see how the non-scientific mind relies on magic to support its positions. Why do we call it magic? Because they cannot tell you any natural mechanism that could possibly transmit these supposed astral influences. If one can't determine a mechanism, astrology is just so much hocus pocus. But many people who don't understand how to think critically about such things buy into the scam. It's pretty much just a lot of mumbo jumbo. But the astrologers can make money by selling horoscopes.
Yeah. Well, we've just had a call from David, and he doesn't understand how preachers can keep pushing their nonsense and people keep giving them money when science is so much more interesting and is true to boot. So how do preachers keep their audiences from falling asleep with their dribble? Well, I think one thing is, so far as I can tell, the main thing that the main thing that keeps people going to church is they want to live forever. And we've got a call now, but I'll get back to this in a minute. We're going to take the call now.
Hello, caller. Please give us a name or a nickname by which we may refer to you.
Yes, this is Bill.
Bill. Well, thank you for calling, Bill. We really appreciate your calling and glad to hear from you. Could you tell us what your interest is?
Well, I think you have a very interesting program today, and talking about the universe that we look out with a Hubble telescope and see more of than we've ever seen before. I just wanted to point out that this is the time of year, and many of your listeners may be sending out greeting cards now, and some of your listeners may insist on sending and may want to send out religious-themed greeting cards. However, there is a website where you can get wonderful color images from the Hubble telescope made already into greeting cards to send out to your friends and family, and that is it's at http://hubblesite.org /gallery/holiday, and there may be many of your listeners who want to send greeting cards that are not religiously themed, and these are very good cards and beautiful cards that draw on and they're made available to the public, because all of that is publicly financed, and they're made available to the public for free. You can download the JPEG and then take it to your neighborhood printer, and have a few hundred printed up and send them out.
Well, thanks for that comment, Phil. That's I think that's very interesting, because I guess in my mind there is nothing more awe-inspiring or spectacular than those pictures from the Hubble telescope, as I said. And if you could send them out as greeting cards for the holidays, I think that's an absolutely great idea.
Yeah, talk about a religious experience. Viewing some of these pictures is really awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
The one you flashed on the screen a few minutes ago of the wide field with the galaxies, that's an unbelievable picture.
Yeah.
When you consider how big each one of those galaxies is. And I just think, and I see it there now. It's an unbelievably awe-inspiring picture. It makes us feel pretty insignificant, I think.
I think just looking at this, it does. I have another statistic that I think makes people feel even less significant if they take it to heart, and that is there are about as many stars in the universe, we think, as there are grains of sand in all the beaches in the world. Now, if you ever go to a beach and you pick up a handful of sand and you start counting the grains one by one, you won't get to supper that day. I guarantee.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm talking about stars. And where are we? We are just insignificant compared to our sun, size of our sun, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I want to compliment you, both of you, Jonas and Ralph, for a wonderful program today, and helping us to see the grand universe that we're a part of.
Okay, remember, you're made of stardust. Thanks a lot, Phil.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, getting back to David's comment here, I think, how do preachers keep their audiences? And my feeling is that most people are involved in religion and stay deeply tied to it because they want to live forever. They really are afraid to die. And in order to do that, what they've been taught is that they have to believe in some God who is going to let them live forever. Okay, we have another call here. We just have a very short time left. Caller, would you give us your name and a question or comment?
Hello, my name is Daisy. And what I wanted to say is most people recognize that the moon affects people's behavior. And so I think that astrologic or astrologers may believe that the planets may also affect people's behavior. I don't necessarily think that belief is wrong. And I think that astrologic is actually just designed to point out tendencies in people. It doesn't determine their destiny or have any power over their own freedom to make decisions.
Okay, now you say that most people probably believe the moon affects behavior, but actually this is shown not to be true. There are some people who say, well, the moon affects the tides, so it could affect us. If we had more time, I could explain to you why that's not true. I could explain to you why it affects the tides but won't affect us. On the other hand, since there is no mechanism that astrologers can use to explain how these planets could affect us, then we have no reason to believe it. Now, you made a good comment, and I'd like to talk more about it, but we only have a minute left, and we're going to have to sign off. And so if you could call us back sometime on a future show and bring this up, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, goodbye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've got about a minute to go, so it's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper and write down this information.
This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. And
you can see this show most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m.
Our thanks to Sam, Larry, and Faithless for technical help, and to the staff at CTV, KNOX, and to all of our callers. Please call again whenever you have the chance.